Okay, welcome everybody to the first meeting of the Baltimore County Delegation. We're meeting a little earlier than usual because we have an issue at hand that we want to be addressed on as quickly as possible. We'll talk about that in a second, but a little bit of housekeeping first. I first of all want to wish Delegate Cardin a happy birthday. Nice job. I don't know, what is he, 42, 41? What are you there? So
54.
Yeah, yeah, it happens. So happy birthday to you. I want to introduce to you, I know she's on screen, our new counsel from DLS is Charity Scott. Wherever she is on your screen, you can find she has DLS after her name there. Charity has been around, and she actually was one of the analysts in Ways and Means, and I think, yeah, we hit the Hall of Fame on this, and we're in great shape. So Charity is not only responsive, but she's competent also. So good stuff there. Very happy about that. I think that's it. We're going to have some guests in a minute, but we're going to take care of one order of business. First, we need to formally confirm our officers. And for that, I'd like to, I would like to recognize Delegate White. Holland. God, got away from me a second there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve the slate presented as our chair, Delegate Eric Ebersol, Vice Chair, Delegate Carl Jackson, and Secretary, Delegate Cheryl Pasteur.
If there's a second, Delegate Allen.
Yes, I'd like to second that.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I'm going to get a voice vote on this, or we'll do a hand raise. All in favor of that slate as stated, please raise your hands. And it carries mostly unanimously, a hand or two missing, but we certainly have a quorum of people that were listening closely enough to raise their hands on that. Thank you, Delegate Carl Jackson. Next order of business is you have been provided with yesterday. And are the hands up to say something, or are we just voting? Okay, there they go. Next order of business is you have been presented with a list of the subcommittees. I kind of poked around with people to see if everybody was happy where they were, and with the chairs to be sure that they were happy. These are the lists are as they were last year, and they are online and were sent to you. I don't know, Justin, do we have chat up that we can look at or not?
All right, what was that?
Do you have, I don't know if we have the chat running. Sometimes we do not, but if
we do right now, yes.
We do. So you can put a link to those documents in the chat if somebody's having trouble locating them. Also, the rules are just the delegation procedures are there as well. And I'm not going to read them to you here. I'm going to highlight a few things that I think are important. One thing I think I left out of the rules, so I'm going to say that at the top, and I don't see it happening anywhere here, is that for the online meetings, the people who will be allowed on the online version will be members and invited guests. Staff members can watch on the public link for what's going on, and so that'll be our group. I think we cleared that last year, and everybody that's here is an invited guest. We're going to start meetings regularly at 9 a.m. Only in rare circumstances will we change that time. That way there'll be no confusion about when we're starting, and people won't miss parts of meetings or important parts of meetings. I ask you to note in the rules, 11 members is a quorum for approval of a bill, but we only need a simple majority of the quorum present to add an amendment to a bill. We generally don't hold vote open for members that are not here, and also we don't. If a member skips, that's pretty much taken as them abstaining from a vote. Once a member's bills have been read in first reader, and I will cite that there are two examples of that already, that we have two bills for Baltimore County. It is the expectation that the sponsor or the sponsor's supporters will be available to do the briefing at the next meeting. So we already have two bills that we are getting ready to put on the agenda for briefing next Friday to move them through. I don't have much else to highlight there. Justin Balchunas is again the delegation administrator, and we're pleased to have him. I will go through quickly how pleased I am to have the leadership team that was nominated, as well as the chair of alcoholic beverages, Delegate Jackson, the chair of the bond initiatives, Delegate Metzger, the chair of community issues, Delegate Ruth. It's affairs, isn't it, Delegate Ruth? It says issues right here too. I got to change that in the print. Chair of education, Delegate Forbes, and the Chair of Public Safety Bills considerations will be Delegate Cardin. We will not collect dues this year in as much as we used to collect dues to provide food, but it's a little hard to feed you through the screen. So I encourage you to get a good breakfast before you come in. With that said, are there any questions about the procedures that you have seen that I can answer? Okay, seeing none there. Let's see. Meeting times, rules, subcommittee assignments. All right, we're all set. That takes care of the housekeeping business for the delegation, unless my able assistant, Justin, is there anything I've overlooked, Justin, before we move on?
Nope.
Okay,
There isn't.
great. Anybody have any questions before we move to the matter at hand? And I'll give a quick introduction. And do we have our guests here? I don't see them on my screen, but I've only got 25 on there. Justin, do we have them?
Yes.
Yes, they're here.
Okay, excellent. All right, so it has come to my attention. Several delegates brought this to my attention. I thank Delegate Shalega, Delegate Naraki, Delegate Allen, and several others. I think Bendari and Jackson also weighed in, especially since it affects them in their general vicinity, that we have a change by the military in the use of Martin Airport, that there is a plane or a jet that is being retired, which could directly affect a great deal of the airport and the employees around it. We, of course, at the state level, don't make those decisions, but I thought it was important for us as members in Baltimore County to get informed. This decision is being made pretty quickly. So it was my understanding from the delegates that there was this issue was an imminent one that we needed to come to pretty quickly. And so we have 5 guests. We have Major General Burkhead, we have Brigadier General Collins, Brigadier General Dockery, Colonel Burns, and Dr. Campbell from the 1st Air National Guard. And so with that, I don't know if it's first. I threw that in there. It sounded good. I think it just may be Air National Guard. But as I said, I was like, that sounded cool, but it may not have been correct. And so I thank you all for coming. And you have, what we're going to try to do is keep you, to about 20 minutes or so. And then I'm sure there'll be a few questions that people will have for you about things that we can do and that sort of thing. So the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Baltimore delegation and Baltimore County delegation and Mr. Chair. Thanks for having us today to share some information about our wonderful and eminently the first Air National Guard, but we are here today, so we're here today to talk about one specific issue, and that happens to be the future fighter and the future of aviation at Martin State with regard to the Maryland Air National Guard. I have here with me Dr. Campbell, who is our Legislative and Governmental Affairs Director, General Doherty, who is the Assistant Adjutant General for Air, and Colonel Rich Hunt, who is actually the commander of that wing, the 175th Wing, here to discuss where we are today and how we got, a little bit about how we got here. Delegate Cardin, happy birthday again, and Happy New Year to all. So it's been about 2 years that truly this issue has been percolating behind the scenes. And over those 2 years, the amount of work that was done sort of gets us here. Most recently, we put a lot of time and effort working with the congressional delegation and working with the governor's team to bring this to light and give it the attention that it needs to help to work with Secretary of Air Force Kendall and get the ideas percolating about what can be done to save or to consider a future fighter for Maryland. We understand that the fighter that we have, the A-10, while it is a phenomenal piece of equipment and an Army soldier on the ground daily would love to hear that A-10 supporting you in close combat, but we understand that we need to modernize in the Air Force. And so Secretary Kendall, along with the Air Force, are working through what that looks like. And with the age of the A-10, their decision was made that we divest of that. So we're not trying to fight the fact that the A-10 is an aged piece of equipment and that there may be better options out there. But we would, of course, want to look at options for keeping a fighter or a flying mission in Maryland. And so shout out to the Maryland delegation, congressional delegation, for all their hard work that they have put into this once brought to light. Of course, Congressman Ruppersberger leading the way, the Senators Cardin and Van Hollen consistently reaching out to DOD, as this is a DOD opinion. And we're fortunate to have such a great congressional delegation. You know, it's Congressman Harris, of course, being a member of Appropriations, makes a difference in this. So we are continuing to press as we can to get the story out, to talk about ideas about where we can land with the flying mission in Maryland, completely understanding that it is a federal decision at the Department of Defense level to make those hard decisions. So today we're here to give you some additional information about how we got here, a little bit about the 175th Wing, and answer any questions. So I'm going to turn it over to General Doherty.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. General Doherty. It's an honor and privilege to get a chance to address you today and talk about kind of where we are as the Maryland Air National Guard, where we're trying to get to, and some of the challenges we're facing. I'll start with a little history lesson. I always like to talk about this, and I think you can see the slides, but I'll bring your attention to the two pictures. So the picture on the top right is the Jenny there, the Curtiss JN4 Jennies. So we were the first, to your point, to fly in the Air National Guard back in June of 1921. Post-war, we stood up this flying squadron. So you can see that picture there. And the other picture is the A-10C aircraft. We have 21 of those. We started flying those in the late 1970s. And we've been flying those for 45 years. So it is an older aircraft, certainly, but extremely capable and set to deploy this spring to CENTCOM. Our Maryland A-10s will be in CENTCOM and 300 airmen downrange, and we're excited about that. The other thing I like to hit on is our time at Martin State. So back in the late 50s, we were getting our first jet aircraft, the F-86 Sabre. We were operating down in Harbor Field. That runway was not long enough. So thanks to Martin State, Glenn L. Martin, and the community, we were able to move up to Martin State in the late 1950s. So we've been there for 65 years, and we are part of that community. And I think that's where we're different than our active duty counterparts is the people that we have. We spend time and we stick around for decades. So the airmen that we have, they are part of the community, not only serving in a federal capacity, but certainly our state response. And we have airmen that have been there, like I said, for decades. So we certainly want to stay there. And I know we can't promise that with the current Air Force plan that we'll have a continued presence at Martin State. So we'll see where that goes. Next slide, please. General Burke had mentioned the 175th Wing. Just a quick background, we're a one-wing state on the air side. And the majority of our airmen serve in that wing. We're authorized a little over 1,500 airmen. We have two major mission sets, if you will. The number one is A-10 operations, or I should say the first. Those are your pilots, maintainers, and all the support entities that go into supporting those 21 A-10C aircraft. And the other mission set is cyber operations. So both offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. And the intelligence squadron that has that going. Again, we've been doing A-10s for about 45 years, cyber operations for about the last decade. We do a few other things, but those are the two big mission sets there as well. Next slide, please. So before I get into the strategic priorities, let me talk a little bit about the current Air Force plan. So as General Burke had said, it's pre-decisional right now, but we expect it to be in the upcoming PBR. And that is the plan that the Air Force in 2025 will divest our A-10C aircraft, take them away from us, and turn the 175th Wing into a cyber wing, if you will. So we have lived through this before. Once upon a time, we had both C-130s and A-10s. And back in the 2005 BRAC, we lost our C-130 flying mission. And here we are less than 2 decades later, the Air Force is looking to come and take our other flying missions. So we would have no longer flying in the Maryland Air National Guard. We'd be the only state in the nation that doesn't have a flying mission, with the exception of DC Air National Guard, which is flying in Maryland. They have 2 flying missions. Based on that, over the last couple of years, we created these strategic priorities to figure out how to get after a future fighter mission for Maryland. So you can see these 3 priorities that we have that we're working towards to accomplish, and we'll work through those today. The first is the runway renovation piece. This is required to support any of the other future fighter missions that the Air Force has. What we have now works for the A-10 aircraft, but it doesn't work for the F-16s, the F-35s, or the F-15EX, which is what we're looking to compete for. So we need an 8,000-foot runway to do that. Right now, we have a 7,000-foot usable runway length at Martin State. Once this runway renovation is complete, projected to be done in July of 26, we'll have 8,100 feet of usable concrete length, and that'll allow us to transition successfully to one of these future fighters. Future fighter mission I mentioned, this is the #1 priority of the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Hokanson. And the 25 for 25 simply means right now there are 25 fighter squadrons in the Air National Guard. As we look to divest some of these legacy platforms, like the A-10s, like some of the pre-model F-16s, or some of the F-15Cs, when it's all said and done, we should still have 25 fighter squadrons in the Air National Guard. The reason it's very effective and efficient to fly fighters in the Guard, because you realize a lot of cost savings. We're very experienced, very talented. We capture a lot of those pilots and maintainers coming off active duty. And for that reason, we have to fly our planes less, which is cost savings when it comes to fuel and maintenance on the aircraft. So there are a lot of benefits that the total force realizes by keeping fighters in the Air National Guard. We're working on getting NDA language that would protect not only Maryland, but all these fighter squadrons in the Guard, to make sure that the Air Force, if they want to come and take our A-10s in Maryland, there's language that prohibits them from doing so until they have a fighter recap plan for our state. And finally, looking to expand the cyber mission in Maryland. We know we do cyber operations very effectively. We understand the attraction to make us a cyber wing based on our proximity to Fort Meade, NSA Cyber Command. And we welcome the opportunity to grow our cyber mission because we know we can recruit some of those talented operators. But we don't want to do so at the expense of a flying mission, because we know what that means to our state, to our nation, and to our national defense strategy, and how important it is that we stay in that role. Next slide, please. So I'll run through this quickly. It's just a quick milestone talking runway renovation. Kind of where we are now in September 23. Governor Moore just approved last week the $32 million going towards the runway renovation project. So that'll take place starting in this spring. We'll start to renovate that runway while our A-10s are downrange. So we're excited to see that happen. I mentioned July 26th. That's kind of the line in the sand as we work with the MAA, the Maryland Aviation Administration, to make sure this happens. So again, if we finish in July of 26, that allows us to take on a future fighter at the beginning of fiscal year 27, 1 October of 2026, which is what we told the Air Force we'd be prepared to do. We do have some major milestones to accomplish. You can see in the top left of that screen, really gets into some of the obstruction clearance challenges that we need to accomplish and some of the funding requirements to do that. Next slide. So this is just a picture of the runway, some of the money we have. We're going to execute about $53 million this year towards this project. That gets us a little bit over about half of what we need to finish the project off. And again, that's a cost sharing effort between the DoD. So $32 million this year through our CODELs, through a lot of accounting and the NDAA, 16 million match from the state. So thank you for that through Governor Moore and the team. And then another $5 million through the FAA. We are laser focused on doing projects that get us the 8,100 feet we need. So really, as you look in the picture, that's the blue and red on the runway. And as you look at a light green area, there's some trees that need to go away. And as you look at Eastern Boulevard there, just to the right of the green, there's some Amtrak catenaries or power lines that need to get lowered. And we're working to accomplish that now. Next slide. A lot of information on this. So I mentioned, if you look at what's highlighted on the screen, it's some of the things that are unfunded that we're looking at. We did have good news story. We had some excess money left over from what was actually a program for the runway renovation this spring. So we're going to be able to use that money and put it towards the catenary obstruction removal that should take place this year, or I should say the design and funding, awarding the funding. And then really, we're looking at requiring additional funds going into FY or calendar year 25 to finish this program. This renovation off. So additionally, about $22 million for obstruction clearance, and then about nav aids that we need to relocate, another $10 to $12 million. That's what we expect to spend. Next slide. Finally, this is just the preliminary budget summary. Again, the immediate focus phase one of the money we're spending this year, it says $48 million. It's actually more like $53 million, which is going to get us well on our way. And then we get into the catenary lowering project going into next year. And then finally, we finish things off in 2025, assuming the funding comes through, to finish cutting down the trees, relocating the nav aids, repainting that runway, and then we'll look to have things done. Again, it's a cost sharing effort. I mentioned, if you look on the right, it says FAA is on the hook for 90%, the state for 10%. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to allow the FAA to put in the $5 to $10 million they typically do for a regional airport. So we're looking at the state or the DoD to pick up the additional cost sharing. We're competing for $4 million next year from the DoD, and we'll be looking for some state support there as well to get this across the finish line. But that's where we're at. We expect about another $30 to $35 million to finish this project off if we want to get it done in 2026. So I'll pause there. That's the runway renovation piece, and I'll turn it over to Colonel Hunt, who's going to talk a little bit about the future fighters aspect of this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. Honor and privilege to be able to speak with you. I'm a very proud Baltimore County resident. 2 daughters, one up at Hereford High School, and my youngest had just dropped off at George Washington Carver Center for the Arts. So thank you for what you do. I love living in Baltimore County. We've been there since 2013, and I appreciate all the service that you provide us. It's a fantastic place to raise a family, and just a beautiful part of our state. All I want to do on the picture of the map slide is just to provide just a little bit of a backdrop and a big picture as to where we fit in this entire puzzle. As General Burke had described in the beginning, that the Air Force is making a significant strategic shift and reprioritizing its resources toward modernization. And that is all directed at trying to re-optimize the Air Force for great power competition. And the big idea from the senior leaders has been, as we shifted out of the counterterrorism wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and over Syria, and our focus is more driven toward great power competition against nation states like Russia, number one priority being the People's Republic of China, that we needed to completely remodernize and reshape the capabilities, the technology, and the structure of the Air Force to be optimized to meet that capability that is being produced and modernized at a rapid rate, especially in the People's Republic of China. And so there are major strategic decisions that are being made all across the DoD, and especially in the Air Force. And when it comes to fighter squadrons, back in the Desert Storm days, we had approximately 135 fighter squadrons across the entire Air Force. Today, that number is 55. So we're far less than half, almost a third of our capacity and strength that we had during the Desert Storm days. And a lot of that is because we've modernized with more capable technology and efficiency, where we just do not require as many aircraft, as many fighters. But that has continued to a point where now our requirement today is to have 60 fighter squadrons for steady state operations in the Air Force. So all across the active duty Air Force and the reserve components, the requirement is 60 to meet our day-to-day commitments. Those commitments and that requirement is just based on steady state, meaning no major theater war that has taken place for the assets to be utilized. And so if the requirement today is now at 60, but we're operating under that requirement, there's some risk that is taking place there, since we're already at the number of 55. Of those 55 fighter squadrons across the entire Air Force, 25 exist in the Air National Guard. And as General Doherty explained, there are a lot of efficiencies and a lot of benefits to the Air Force because of the capability and the experience level that the Air National Guard is able to provide the Air Force, just because of our enduring experience in these mission sets, and then a cost savings because of lower operating costs that it provides. So we're one of those 25 fighter squadrons, and all these different dots really just represent the current status, the future of those fighter squadrons. So the squadrons that are in green are the ones that are flying aircraft that the Air Force is committed to, or they're in transition to a future newer fighter aircraft. The squadrons that are displayed in yellow are currently in a platform that is safe. However, they have not transitioned to one of the newer fighters. So they have a problem set in the next 5 to 10 years for their future. But the ones in red, that's really hits home because there is no identified platform to replace what the Air Force has said they will divest. And although we were the first Air National Guard organization to be unit equipped, which we're very proud of, unfortunately, in this case, we're the first squadron in the Air National Guard that has been identified to lose our flying mission with no replacement fighter or any flying mission whatsoever, as has been described already. And the reason why we are first is because there's a tension that is taking place. On one side, the Air Force is behind on meeting the demand signal for cyber capability. And of course, in Maryland, we have a very proud an outstanding cyber capability right here, with our location joined with Fort Meade and NSA and Cybercom. And so we've invested heavily in that. We're very proud of that capability. And so we were able to provide the Air Force part of that solution to meet that requirement. And then the other piece, as General Doherty was just describing, is we have a runway issue at Martin State. And so the renovation of that runway, in order to meet the requirement the base would need to have at Martin State to support a future fighter. And so we get caught in this situation where, although the Air Force needs the fighter squadrons and there are limited resources, they also need to expand in cyber, and we've had a runway problem for a long period of time. And so without a clear solution for all of those problems, it kind of became an easy kill type decision for the Air Force to say, well, Maryland will be the first to lose their fighter mission with no follow-on replacement fighter mission, but we will transition them into the cyber mission set. So that's why that decision kind of arrived at this point. Unfortunately, that decision was made in a vacuum. It was not a collaborative decision. General Burkhead, and along with the rest of the leadership through the military department and our civilian leadership, was not part of that decision process. And it was made on false assumptions that disregarded the fact that there was already a runway renovation plan that would solve that issue by 2027. And now we've gotten to the point where the Air Force has already proceeded down that path with a balanced budget submission to the executive branch, and they want to continue to just press with that path. So that's kind of where we're at today, and that's why we've been aggressively getting after this conversation in order to make sure that the decision that is being made is in the best interest of support for the national defense strategy, that is utilizing the talents and skill sets that we have and why we serve. And then it's also a decision that is actually made on current day data and facts versus the omission of some critical pieces that led to this decision. And so that's the big picture on the map and how we fit into that and how that decision was made at this point. And if we could flip to the last slide, and then I'll hand it back over to General Burkhead and General Doherty, is why does it matter? And so just since September 11th alone, your Maryland Air National Guard citizen airmen have deployed in combat service 7 times into the Middle East, and they're all listed through that slide. From 2 weeks after September 11th, we were in Kuwait, and we were part of the kickoff of Operation Enduring Freedom into Afghanistan. Our last deployment was in 2019 to Afghanistan again, and we were very proud that our airmen are getting ready to head out the door in just a couple of months. They have a short notice deployment to the Middle East, as General Doherty had mentioned. And so this is the part that is interesting, so that as the DoD and especially the Air Force has shifted to a priority for great power competition against nations like China, and they're making significant strategic decisions all across the department and portfolio to make cuts like the A-10 program as they shift to new equipment. At the same time, as we know, the world gets a vote in all of these events. And as we've seen what took place in Ukraine just a couple of years ago, and then most recently with Israel, Hamas, and the tension that exists in the Middle East once again is a big reason why our A-10s and our airmen are deploying back to the Middle East, because that is where they're needed. So they'll be out the door, they're ready to go, and we're just trying to keep them focused on that while this mission instability is looming as soon as they return from that combat service. And then finally, I'll close out with why is it so important for us to have a fighter mission at Martin State as part of the state of Maryland. It's not only the fighter capability that we provide for the federal mission, but for the community and for the state, there is a significant amount of capability that our airmen who are trained in this federal mission are also able to provide support when needed and when called upon by the governor, which we have done time and time again. And on a daily basis, one of the things that hits really close to home is just our firefighters. So we have our own federal fire department as part of our organization at Martin State that falls within the 175th wing. And we have an agreement with Baltimore County called a Community Mutual Aid Agreement. And that mutual aid agreement allows us to assist the volunteer firefighter and fire stations when they respond to local community services and needs, incident response. And we do that multiple times a day, every day. And we're very proud of that. We love being part of the community and assist the community, But unfortunately, if we were to lose our flying mission at Martin State, then there's no need for us to have a firefighter capability. And there's many others like that would continue to no longer be required because they're there to support that federal mission. And then we're not able to provide that critical support that our community has grown accustomed to and absolutely requires on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I really appreciate your attention, your time, greatly appreciate your support, and especially what you do for us through Baltimore County. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Both Brigadier Generals, appreciate your presentations, and Major General Burkhead, thank you for bringing them here for us today. Sobering presentation, to be sure. And I think some of the members of the delegation will probably have a question or two about procedure or also how we can assist. And I see a hand up, and so I'm going to go to Delegate Guyton first.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very, very much for your service and your work on this issue. Not only do I have a son who is active military and air defense, so I understand how important these missions are. And I think it's incredibly important that Maryland stays an integral part of this sort of service to our country and our protection for our state. So I absolutely get that. I also rent a hangar at Martin State. So my question is actually more about the general aviation ops and how they might be affected by both the renovation. It looks like you're really talking about enlarging the runway behind the hangar, so they may not be that affected by that. But what sort of security changes and airspace restrictions might go into place if we move forward with this plan, which I hope we do, but I also hope we keep the general aviation clients in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, Matt, I'm happy to answer that. That's a great question. The MA is actually really excited because, again, there's been challenges over the decades of getting money into Martin State and helping to assist. So when we came to this and said, look, not only do we need this to happen, we're going to help you secure the funds required to do some of these massive renovations. A longer runway is beneficial to the MA because it allows them to bring in more clients, better clients, potentially overflows from BWI, their other major airport that the MA supports. And bring them into Martin State to allow them to operate. So it's a win-win for both sides. We don't expect any sort of restrictions when it comes to airspace or their ability to operate. And we're not infringing upon any of the civilian side of that. It's just a bigger, better, more functional runway that allows them to bring in hopefully larger aircraft or more gas on their current aircraft so they can fly to places like Europe and Asia. So they're going to see a lot of benefits once we complete this renovation. So it'll not only benefit the military side, but definitely our civilian partners as well.
Ma'am, let me just add.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Ma'am,
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, please.
Yes, thank your son for his service, and if he wants to join the Maryland National Guard, we stand ready to take him. But let me just add
Ever vigilant, very nice.
The amount of concrete is already here, so it's not like we're adding any more concrete. It's a matter of finishing the amount of runway in a better way and improving that. So what you see now as far as the length of the concrete will continue to be here. And I just bring that to your attention from an environmental concern, maybe that amount of runway is already here. It's just improving it.
And General Doherty,
Yes.
about the different kind of aircraft and why the runway is being renovated for the purposes of those aircraft. You want to go into that for a second?
You're talking about the military side?
Yeah, this military side.
Yeah, so it's just, again, it goes back to there are some obstructions in the way that don't allow us to fully use that 8,100 feet of concrete. So the renovation will allow the entire portion to be usable. And then we already had a plan in place. The MAA was going to renovate this runway anyway to take the 7430. The trees had already been approved to be cut down. The cat areas were going away as well. So a lot of these things were already happened. We just went and said, can we make this entire concrete portion usable? So not impeding on Eastern Boulevard, not doing anything with the river that runs there on the one side. So again, we're just taking the existing concrete and making the entire portion usable. So it benefits both sides.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for the question, Delegate Guyton. Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the time. Thank you to the Guard for coming on today. This is a big deal, not only for our district, for Delegate Shalega and I, as Mr. Chair alluded to, but for the entire county. It is at least 550 or so direct jobs that will be lost if this goes away, and many, many more indirect jobs if we lose this flying mission. It is tens of thousands, probably millions of dollars of economic impact to our communities. Our communities are, frankly, some of the most needy and underserved in Baltimore County in that east side there in Middle River and Hawthorne and places like that Delegate Schlage and I represent, that Delegate Bhandari and Delegate Allen and Delegate Jackson and Delegate Metzger and Grammer and Long represent. It's a big deal. The Guard has, eloquently said all the things that they do for the community. Look, my family, had the Guard or the DOD fire department riding by our house with Santa. They do all those kinds of other things inside of the community that go unnoticed as well. And for someone like myself, my grandfather worked at the Glenn L. Martin Company during World War II. There is a proud tradition, proud aviation history in Baltimore County. Glenn L. Martin, Lockheed Martin is gone. We've lost thousands of jobs in the community recently over the past several years because of that. This would just be another hit on top of it for an area, frankly, that cannot afford to have that happen. So I appreciate the delegation for listening this morning. We would certainly appreciate everyone's help as we move forward in this process. I believe that Delegate Schlage and I are going to put a letter together, and we would certainly appreciate anyone's consideration to sign on to that letter as we move forward in this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. It wasn't really a question, but a very accurate assessment of the situation. And when you have that letter put together, let us know, and we'll be sure and alert the delegation that it's available for them to join in. That's at least one way of going toward this. Delegate Schlage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Guard for being here today. We really appreciate it. And Delegate Naraki, your last sentence should have been, "Isn't that so?" And then it's a question. But I do have a question. Delegate Naraki and I were at a community meeting last night, and someone said that they thought there was a provision for Air Force One to use Martin State as a backup. Is that true?
So no, it's not true. And with the caveat, probably if it were true, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Thank you. Okay.
The rest of that sentence. I could tell you, but
you have to kill me. Okay. And finally, I'm really pleased to hear that you mentioned the NDA, that there's I guess an amendment being offered on Capitol Hill to require air wings to stay at these Guard bases. Is that what I heard you say?
No, there is currently not, it's not in the NDAA. We desire.
Yeah, the intent, it was to get something in prohibitive language to require that. That didn't make it in. What the Air Force is required to do is to provide a plan to the congressional delegation of how they plan to recap some of these fighter squadrons going forward. So nothing that prohibits in the current NDAA from them coming to Maryland and Martin State and taking our A-10s. But they've asked the Air Force to look at all the fighter squadrons and their plan to recap them. And it prohibits them from divesting F-16s for 180 days until after they submit that plan, but nothing that would impact Maryland or our A-10s.
And we would be the only state in the country without an air wing, is that right, in the Guard?
Flying mission.
A flying mission. Yeah, not all the states own their own aircraft like we do now. And I say own, but obviously they're federal aircraft, but there are some other ones are associated with active components, and the Guard flies active duty aircraft, things of that, some things called classic or active associates, but every state has some sort of flying mission. We do have the DC Air National Guard flies out of Andrews Air Force Base. They have 2 flying missions there, but obviously they do not belong to the Maryland Air National Guard. They belong to the DC Air National Guard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, General Burkhead, gentlemen, for being here. As the rest of the delegation knows, because I don't hide it, I'm an Army veteran myself. I'm especially passionate about the A-10 and its mission. I've trained with A-10s. I've worked with them both in the States and overseas. A-10s have saved the lives of friends of mine. And yeah, there's really nothing that that I'm aware of on the horizon even that comes close to the mission and the capabilities that the A-10 possesses. And I think it's been like 4 or 5 different times the Air Force has tried to retire the A-10s, and Congress has kind of stepped in and stopped it. So my question is basically, and I like our approach, right, of refitting the runway so we can accept future aircraft, when that time eventually does come, because the A-10 is probably nearing 50 years old. But I guess my question is, like, what do we think the odds are that, the Air Force has stopped again from retiring the A-10s? And because last I heard, I thought they might have put a pause on retiring some of them, but those might just be the active ones. And just correct me if I'm wrong.
Come back, please.
Oh, okay.
There is no pause. The Air Force is moving forward. We're down to 260. We're going to lose another 48 this year to take us to 218. And the Air Force is going to continue by FY28. We should help see all the A-10 aircraft invested. And I will say I've been part of that fight for the last decade plus of saving the A-10, and we've always had a member of Congress stepping in and preventing the Air Force from doing so. I think the Air Force has finally won this argument, and Congress supports them moving forward with the divestment of the A-10 platform. So we certainly know how capable it is, and think that it will and continues to contribute in the Middle East and other places around the globe. But unfortunately, there's an appetite to continue to press to save that A-10 platform. So that's kind of why we've needed, along with everyone else, to pivot and make sure that we're in a position to replace the A-10 with a future fighter. So to answer your question, no, I think the Air Force is going to finally have their way. And I think by the end of this decade, no more A-10s will be flying across the total force.
Got it. All right. Thank you, sir.
And let me just add, it is a discussion about money and modernization. And so when do you modernize? It's never a good time. And so the Secretary of the Air Force are putting forth that position. China is the future. What are we going to do for great power competition? And so those discussions are being had. And so the A-10, as you noted, is an aged piece of equipment that they're looking to divest of. I just have to add, and we've said this before, and both have mentioned it, but this fight and the discussion has been going on for quite some time. Within the last 2 to 3 years, that's the deep fight, the close fight, is when that was happening, and the engagement that we're seeing now with our delegation and the governor's office, et cetera, are absolutely on point to try to do everything we can to ensure that we have a future fighter, notwithstanding and understanding that the A-10 is going to go away eventually. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, ma'am. And then one final just question, if I may, Mr. Chair. I think someone noted that the Maryland Air National Guard is the only wing that has like a dual mission. Is that correct? As of right now, the cyber and the A-10s.
The Maryland Air National Guard, we're extremely proud of the mission sets that we do have. There are many Air National Guard states that have multiple different types of missions, and many Air National Guard states that have a large Guard presence. The closest would be Pennsylvania, for example, that has multiple Air National Guard wings that fly different aircraft or do other non-flying missions. What is unique, that is really important, and is such a strategic strength for us in Maryland that we feel like is vital for national security that we hold on to, is there is no other organization under one local command anywhere across the DoD that has exquisite mission sets like fighter operations and offensive, defensive, full spectrum cyber to include intelligence operations. There's no organization across the joint force that has this unique capability. And we feel like that since it takes multiple decades to develop those exquisite skill sets because of the amount of training and just that long-term cultural shift in those mission sets, that the loss of any element of that mission set is a national tragedy, and it will never be replaced to this level, especially as the nature of warfare continues to evolve and the importance of real-time fast decision-making and real-time intelligence and cyber-enabled air operations becomes a critical feature of how we conduct and have a strategic advantage. And we have it right here in Maryland. And that is the piece that we feel like is just an incorrect application for the strategic advantage that we should have. So we want to be part of that future.
Colonel Hunt, can you add on to that with the 6th generation aircraft?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So as the Air Force continues to modernize, I think a lot of folks are familiar with the Lockheed Martin F-35, which is called a 5th generation fighter. And a lot of the characteristics of 5th generation fighter that make it 5th gen is because it has these low observable stealth capabilities combined with this fusion of real-time intelligence and information that is presented to the pilots in order to make very rapid and accurate decisions airborne. 6th generation fighter is what is being worked in the top secret realms and only advances that much further and advances it to a level of speed that is hypersonic and then creates a massive advantage. And as that type of platform is continued to develop, it only adds to the importance of this real-time cyber and real-time intelligence. And you can think of it like back in World War II, where you had the pilot, the co-pilot, you had the navigator, you had the bombardier, you had a tail gunner, you had all these people in this large aircraft in order to make this large bomber successful into, Germany. Well, now you've got it down to where you have this amazing technology and this single seat pilot aircraft, but it is supported externally by numerous cyber and intelligence professionals that are nowhere close to the battlefield, but are a critical part and they are a critical crew member. And so that's the nature of it. We want to be part in the initial cadre for the Air Force in that mission set, and we have the capabilities now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Delegate Metzger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I greatly appreciate the Maryland National Guard for being here today. Again, it's already been discussed. My father worked at the Glenn L. Martin Company, and I've got several family members who were at the Guard. When I first heard about this proposal, first of all, let me say this. You might have the fighter jets, but we've got the fighters right here in this room here today to stand behind and try to fight for this, to stay, as has been alluded to, the lots of jobs. But I've always been a person that believes in Plan B. And since you mentioned the expansion of the runway, do you think it'd be possible that since the state owns the airport, that it would be great for commuter flights to fly in and out of to save people from going to BWI? Because two of my other questions are answered, so that's how I come up with this question.
Well, important to have a question. Thank you, Delegate Metzger.
Yeah, it worked out.
Good to see you. Good to see you, sir. And of course, we loved having your family in the Guard. So I think that's probably not a question that we can answer. What I will say is that every day we come to work here or at Martin's, and the team does an excellent job building relationships, ensuring that the runway and the facility is in top condition to respond, whether on the civilian or the military side. And we have got such great relationships with the Secretary of Transportation and with Ricky Smith from MMA. So I will say that if it is a time that we have to turn it over, it will be in condition that we'd be proud to turn something over.
Thank you.
But we don't want to do that.
But we don't want to do that.
No.
But so the plan B is to put us in a future fighter. That's our plan B.
That's plan B. Plan C is having commuter flights. There we go. And thank you. Delegate Phillips. It's like he might have frozen up. I tell you what, let's go to Vice Chair Jackson, and then we'll come back to Delegate Phillips when his internet's a little nicer to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I just have a question with regards to the expansion of the runway. I think it was said that because we're on a timeline that the state had to put up some money because we couldn't wait for it to come from is it the aviation?
FAA.
The FAA.
The Federal Aviation Administration, yep, the FAA.
Okay. Now, is there any way like the state could be reimbursed like at a later date for that money if this was something that if we wasn't on the clock we would have got from them anyway?
Well, that goes back to preface my comment goes back to this is a known issue prior to this administration, this has been going on a couple of years, and unfortunately it wasn't addressed until the last few months. We've been really on it. So that is a point that we will take away and do some research on about if there's a way to reimburse. Certainly, we're continuing to ask the question of FAA so they know it's a request. Now, if they can request that we can get reimbursement on the back end, we will certainly research that and get back to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just with our budget outlook, we got to be very smart about how we're spending our dollars. So thank you for answering that question.
And Mr. Chair, this is Delegate Phillips. I'm sorry I froze.
So nice to have you back. Don't freeze up on us this time.
Yeah.
Okay? If you're nervous,
Very
just
good.
say so.
So I think Delegate Jackson asked a part of the question I was going to ask, but I will restate it in a different way. As we look at this situation, what is our timeline for impacting potentially the decision either on the A-10 or ensuring that we continue a fighting flyer mission? And also, who specifically should we be directing our concerns to? My dad was a veteran of the Air Force, and I've got a number of constituents that are in the Air National Guard coming from the west side to the east side. Just had the wonderful honor this past weekend of recognizing a gentleman, Wayne Charles, who's been with the Air National Guard for 20 years and just retired. So I understand the importance of the Guard and how it impacts our community. So if you could tell me who, time frame, and who do we address our concerns to? Yes,
sir. So thank you for that question. The time is now. A decision is imminent. That's why I keep going back to this is something that's been in the works, and we're coming to the table now. So the time is now to react, and this is a federal decision. The Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary Kendall, is responsible for ensuring the future of the Air Force and looking at the total force. But it's Secretary Kendall, the Air Force, is putting forward this recommendation, and in the end, it's a federal decision with the members of Congress and deciding on where those dollars will be spent and where the aircraft will go. So it, along with the advice, the best military advice from the Secretary of the Air Force. So it's at that federal level, and our level of the state governor and team, our federal delegation are aware and doing what they can to influence and come up with a reasonable decision.
Thank you.
I'll add that obviously nothing becomes law until the NDA comes out. It just came out this year for 2024. So it would be next year's NDAA that would make this a law that our airplanes are going away. So certainly the Air Force can announce in the near future that this is happening, but which wouldn't be good news for Maryland, but certainly what would drive the final decision would be the NDAA that would drive that divestment of A-10 aircraft. It's into law.
But let me just say that when you're talking about legislative cycle, we know how that works with, whether it's not being in session, the introduction of bills, etc. So it really is not 12 months, it's more like 6 months, and things are already working on the next year's NDAA. So that's why I say the time is now.
Well, thank you all very much. I don't see any other questions. I will say that we had the luxury this week of not having other significant business, so we could give an appropriate and longer than we usually do amount of time to address this. And we appreciate your forthrightness. And I think you can sense the concern among the county delegation here. on this one. I know that you've given us several ideas of how to advocate if indeed we are as concerned as you believe we are, and I believe a lot of us are here. There's also going to be a few actions taken, and as I said, we'll keep an eye on Delegate Shalega and Naraki, and perhaps some others who will help construct at least a support letter. But all of you feel free to act individually too if you want to, advocate with the our federal representatives on this. Delegate Metzger, I see one more hand. Is this a quick one? I'm ready to go, but if you got something.
Yes, it's very, very fast. Is there any way that we can get the slides that they presented so we can look at them?
Are you all willing to share those with us?
Yes, sir. We'll send them out to you.
I would suggest that you just send them to the gentleman that you've been communicating with, Justin, and he will then distribute it out to the delegation. I'll save you the trouble of looking up everybody's address.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Good suggestion, Delegate Metzger. I think it was worth calling on you a second time there. I have a few last things, but before I do, does anybody else have anything for the good of the order before I do that and we adjourn?
Mr. Chair, if I could just 1 second, just thank you for taking the time today to have us on. I invite anyone out, please. Dr. Campbell is waiting for your request, and we'll have you out to any of the Maryland National Guard facilities, Air or Army, to show you what wonderful work we do and to explain some of the things that we offer and how we are of service to our local communities, the state, and the nation. Again, I want to give a shout out to Governor Moore and team for their immediate attention to this matter, and to the Cabinet Secretary Wedefield, Ricky Smith, and team, and all of those who have really understood immediately the importance of this issue, and the congressional delegation. We could not be at this point without them. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us today.
Sounds like in the interim, a field trip for the delegation to me. I appreciate the invitation. I'm seeing nobody else with any, I will say, I'll make 2 requests. These are not rules, but if you do have a bill that you're working on that you think will fall to a Baltimore County bill, I would love it if you'd let me know that we can begin chatting about it. But, there's not a requirement. Once it's dropped, we know about it. If you have an irreconcilable conflict with attending one of the meetings, please let Justin know so that we can mark you. I prefer if you're all here all the time, but if you can't, we'd rather mark you as excused than absent in those circumstances. So try to be sure to let us know. I will also point out that procedurally, we didn't do this real consistently last session, but we will do it. It has been the policy that once the delegation approves a bill and sends it to committee, we amend the bill to make the sponsor the Baltimore County delegation. We did that in some cases, but not in all. So, just so you understand, once your bill is through, if the delegation moves favorably on it to committee, we will actually change the sponsor to the Baltimore County delegation. That's all the last little clearinghouse things. If there's no other business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn here. Somebody unmute and say so moved.
So moved.
So moved.
Mr. Chair.
Perfectly done. And I'll see you all in an hour. Thank you very much.
Be on time.
Yeah, be on time.